Hello, everyone. My name is Feiman Xu, and thank you for joining the collaboratory workshop today. So can you hear me well, especially those sitting on the back row? Okay, good. So I'm teaching Intro to Python workshop for 3 days in a row. So for the people sitting around the workstations, so you can find a password here. It's like the NGS analysis one. So you can log in, and if you are using your own laptop, I think I sent over an email last night to install Anaconda, and let's go starting today's workshop. So here is the outlines for this 3 days workshop. So today we're going to have some setup and concept for this programming language, and we'll know those basic data types and variables, which is the basis for any programming languages. And if we got enough time, we might go through a little bit about if statement. So you know, when we do programming, the most common things is we're setting up some criteria to ask the computers to do stuff for you. So that will be using a lot of if statement. And day 2, we're going over loops, doing iteration things, and like more data types for collections. And day 3, we'll go deep into how to build up functions and reading, writing files for those like critical cases. And we're introducing more Python libraries, which is written for you, so you don't need to like have your self coding for those like repeat stuff. Okay, so how many people here are taking this for credits, like for bioinformatics? Just one. 4. Okay, so for students, we'll have assignments at the end of this files. So I'm expecting like once we finish this class on Thursdays, please like email me your assignment by the end of Saturday. Okay, so but I would recommend it like, because it's not a tough questions, so it's better like you finish this the day 1's assignment just following this. Will probably just take a few minutes, so that should be easier. So before you forget and go back to look into the document. Okay, so has anybody installed Anaconda? So good. Have problems? Oh, good. Okay, sounds good. So now so you all download the files I sent over yesterday. So can you open Anaconda Navigator? So if you are using Mac, you could probably just go through it and finding Anaconda, so they will pop out. Okay. So you will see Anaconda navigators showing up, and please launch the Jupyter notebook. Okay. So once you click launch, you might find like this directory that popping up in your browsers. So they will be listing the home directory for your computers. So go to the place you store for this IPython notebook files. For example, I store in my desktop, and then in the folder Intro to Pythons, and here is my IPython notebook. So click this one, so they will showing up in another tab, which is like this one. Okay. Does anyone follow? Sounds good. Okay. So if you don't have Anaconda, you can also use the Google Colab, and then just upload the IPython notebook files and open there. You should be good to go. So let me know if you have any problems to this step. So So we are all on the same page. So this one is the way, so Anaconda is a distribution for Python, showing up several applications for Python. And this is one way we could do interactively, showing this with the notebook. So here is just in this file is just listing some of the usage for Jupyter Notebook. So we'll go through this one by one. For example, you will see this kind of is like you input some things, and once you type in something and you hit this run buttons, they will run specific code inside this cell for you and generating those output. So that's starting with the first line. Usually it's the famous hello world. So here I'm trying to introduce the first data type, which is string. So in Python, strings is usually coding with the quotation mark. For example, you see this one, they're using this double quotation. So anything inside this quotation mark will be a string. So it's no matter it's single quotation or double quotations, it just need to be in pair. Okay. So anything put inside will be a string. And even just one character, it could be also seen as a string. So we're printing out, so it's built-in functions, which means anytime you call print and anything inside this parenthesis, they will be calling printing to these strings. Okay, so let's execute the first programs, which is the printing hello world. So once you've done this, you just hit the run buttons. They will show in the output right below the cells. Anyone, everybody is following? Okay. So that is how we starting to do programming. Okay. So string, like I said, usually is surrounded by quotation mark, either single or double. But you have to be careful. If this is not in pair, then it will be raising some typing errors. Okay. So this one, here's 3 examples. Okay, when you run this one by one, so it's double quotation mark circling this hello. So they will telling you it's the same, printing out this string as well. If it's single quotation, it will do the same thing. But if it's not in pair, they will raise this syntax errors. So basically Python will debugging for you, telling you exactly which position is raising these arrows. Okay. So they will telling you at this positions terminated string literal, which means they can find another parenthesis in pairs to end this string. Okay. So this is the first concept for these string data types. So there's several or some special characters you might need to keep in mind. This is useful. So for example, like this -n, so this means next new line. And then if it's like /t, there will be a tab. Okay. And if you need a quotation mark for the same types as the enclosing ones inside the string should be escaped using the \. Okay. So just in case, like when you try to using this \, you need to be extra careful because it means some things in this programming languages. Okay. So now it's good for the string data types. Any questions? Okay. So it's really straightforward and really common data type in Python. So across this whole IPython notebook, you will see different types of cells. For example, like this one is like the coding cells, and like this one, this specific one is like a demonstrate markdown cells. It won't execute anything, but it's just for people to share code or to demonstrate some usage for specific packages or softwares. So we just introduced a little bit concept for functions. For example, we just print the hello world strings calling the printing functions. So you can see this is kind of syntax for Python to call functions, which means you can call anytime, anywhere inside your whole script by just calling this print parenthesis. So inside this parenthesis will be the parameters or argument for this specific functions. So print is very straightforward. It's just trying to showing something on your screens. So you could imagine the X could be the things you want to show. So it's like you're putting your argument inside these functions to ask Python to print it out for you. Okay, so this is the basic concept for functions. Okay. So next sections, we are going to also is like special characters, where we are introducing the comments. So when you write script, sometimes it's like hundreds or thousands of lines, and you might put different functions, different block inside your script, and you have to make, sometimes you need to note or let other collaborators knowing what you are actually trying to do for this specific lines of code. So that's when you use the comment things. So there's, I would say, one way to do this is using this hash sign. So for example, this is the one we just run. So it's like print hello. So I'm telling people reading this line saying, what does this line meaning? So I use this hash signs saying to print this hello terms. Okay. So anything following this hash sign, they will be canceled. They will not be taken as a comment. Okay. So once you put this, they will just do the same thing as print does, but anything after the hash sign in comments is just for human to read what this means for this specific lines. Okay. So this is a good way when we just finish one line and trying to remind ourselves what this line is doing. So we use this hash signs. Okay. So you can also do this with multi-line string enclosed in triple quotation mark, like double quotation triple, or it's like single quotation. But as well, these need to be in pair. Okay. So usually you can think about this. It would be like more at the beginning of some sections or functions at the beginning, telling people after this comment, what are we going to do with this block of code? Okay. So here is an example saying, this is my first program. I'm just telling myself, okay, this was the first thing we're trying to do, and then call this print functions. Again, this one will just print out hello world, but the things inside this triple quotations, they won't be reading out. Okay. So far, everybody follows, right? So it's really straightforward for taking the strings. Okay. So now let's do some exercise you can do in this interactive cells right below these examples. We are trying to replace X or Y with your own words and trying to run through everyone and see what would happen and what would be the arrows showing up. So let's have 3 minutes and trying to see what would show up on your screens. Okay. So let's go through my examples here, and we can go through which type of errors we could avoid when just doing with the strings. So I'm trying to replace X with dogs and Y with cats. Okay. If we're just printing out dogs, okay, they will show in exactly what they are. And it's also, like I said, that we can use just a single quotation mark. They will give you the same thing. Okay. If we are putting in \T, so remember they will be inserting a tab inside the strings. So this will tell you the output will be dog and then the tab between the cats. Okay. So usually tab is very much like blank, but I think in every editors or every tools you're encoding, you can specify which tab specifically meaning. Default could be just 4 blank spaces.
For strings, I know that they're typically like in quotation marks. I was wondering because like in C++, you put like just single so where it becomes like a single character. This Python treated the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you just use single characters, then it's also a string. Yeah. So and so you just use in \n, so which means next line, right? So when you execute it, so they will put docs and then, sorry, I should put this close. So docs and then next line, okay. And then let's see this one, if we put quotation mark, not impaired. And what types of, so basically from Jupyter Notebook, they would probably tell you by color saying there's something wrong here when you type the things. But when you execute this, they will tell you exactly where the error occurs, which is the syntax error occurring, showing up here. The thing on this is like they were expecting a termination for the strings. They're expecting another quotation mark. The quotation mark is not paired. Okay, so we try to avoid these errors. Okay, just this one. So they will treat this one as a strings and then print it out. Okay. And the same thing if you are using the single quotations for this one. Again, they will show in different arrows saying there's unterminated strings. And okay. And then once you put a \/ here, the problem should be solved. Okay. And if you are using this one in pair, for example, so you can see from here, basically, the one to specify this string will be double quotation. So they will treat everything inside as a strings. So this one should be fine to print out a dogs and then single quotation and then cats. Okay. Yeah.
Will the backsplash ever be printed?
Ever be printed? Let me think. No. But you're doing this in different ways. So that's for special.
Sorry, so like in R, a space doesn't mean anything, right? Does it mean anything here? Like if you it does.
It will take a space. For examples, if you are printing, you mean like this?
Yeah.
They will,
I see.
so there will, everything you enclose inside this, there will be a whole
Okay.
strings. Okay. Even it's before is the character start, they will be also counted.
Does it mean, sorry, does it mean, for like, if you were to put it like elsewhere, like before the. Yeah, never mind, we're good.
So just like everything inside it, if very simple, it's just anything inside that we're taking is one variable, which is a strings. Yeah. So any questions so far? Okay. It's like Python have, which is the strings. And remember the usage for this one is the quotation mark in pair. So you should also need to be careful for those special characters, especially backslash. And backslash T will be a tab, and backslash N will be telling you to go to next line. And also those empty space is also a parenthesis quotation mark. They will take into one variable, one string variables. Okay. So let's go to the second data type, which is numbers. So there's probably 3 types of numbers in Python. So we are going through the most common one, which will be the integer. In short, Python you can call int, and also floating point, which means numbers with floating with digits, okay, like 0.01, 0.02, etc., which is could be called by this float to changing the specific numbers into floating data types. And there's another one.
Or information before it becomes inaccurate.
There should be, but currently I'm not coming to my mind. You mean like how much will be the accurate one?
Yeah, and I feel like you can change that. I don't know.
You can definitely change here by it's called the round functions, telling you like which specific decimal you want to go to. But you are saying the default maybe is 12, or yeah, that is what I remember. So you can call this function called round, also a parenthesis, if you put into 0.001, but you just need to 1 digit, and this like round 0.001 and 1. That will tell you just printing to the first decimal. Okay. There's different way to do it. We will go through this later. Okay, so integer is very you guys know it's just a numbers like 1,000s, 1 or 2 without a point, without a floating behind. Okay. Floating point will be more different, which means like 1.1. You can also writing this is in scientific ways. Okay. And like complex, we're not going through for here. It's like an imaginary unit, but you need it's most of the time is using for mathematical programming. So we are not dealing with this for this introductory workshop. So speaking of numbers, most usage is like you need to do some operations, arithmetic operations. So Python is very, I would say, like for math. So there's plus and minus, which will be exactly the same, like we know in math. Multiplication is this asterisk mark. Okay. If you are duplicate multiplication for this asterisk, there will be exponentiation. Okay. And this slash is like numerical divisions. Okay, so always remembers when you divide 2 integers, they will result in a float. So the result will always becoming a float data type. Okay. And double slash, which means integer division, which means they will return you the result. It will be the whole numbers, which will be the after division, what will be the integers shown up, not the remainder, but just the integer itself. Okay. If you are just want to getting the remainder, or we call modulo, which will be the percent operators, they will tell you the remainder for this specific numerical division. And anything like when we write equations, anything inside this parenthesis, they will taking this as priorities, okay? Regardless of the mathematical rules. So let's go through some examples, okay? When we try to adding 5 with 7s, just using this plus operators, and they will tell you the output will be 12 showing up. Okay, so this one, the next ones would put 5 plus 7 inside this parenthesis and multiply these numbers with 12. So remember, anything inside this parenthesis will be seen as priorities. So they will adding up and then do the multiplication. 12 multiplied with 12. 144. Okay, and the double asterisk, which means exponentiations. So there should be 9 showing up. Okay.
So are there any situations where the Python won't follow like the normal PEMDAS,
Normal.
like PEMDAS, the order of operations? Like
Oh.
parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division. It's not like there's, I know like sometimes the iPhone calculators will like do things in a slightly different order and spit out a different value than like other calculators.
I think that will be the same as the one you know about math. Yeah.
So could you do 3 parentheses, 2 parentheses, and then would it be 3 times 2, or would that just not be allowed?
It should be allowed. You mean like you are adding more of the priorities inside it?
Instead of just explicitly writing the multiplication sign, just
Mhm.
put the implied parentheses next to a number.
Mhm.
Because like traditionally that's assumed that's multiplication operating, but this Python,
no.
it doesn't.
You need to have those operators.
Okay.
So integer divisions, division will be more times you need to pay more attention into it. For like I said, if you're divided 2 integers and the data type output will be changing because they will always return you a float or like this one, okay? And if you use like, you just need the integer divisions showing up and you don't need anything after the dot or the digit, then you need to use the double slash to do integer division. Okay, modulus when you just need to do to get those remainders from this divisions is also very useful when you do like loop coding loop trying to do repeated stuff. Okay, and okay, so that is the things we could we need to pay more attention when you do the division. Okay. So like this one that will tell you is finished until, I don't know how, maybe 16 digits showing up, okay, to be precision for this, the default setting. So now we've know 2 data types, very common one with string, one with numbers, and in numbers, you know there's different types. Most of one you will use integers will be a intact numbers like 3 or 4, 100, 10,000. For float is always with the digit with decimals. And then this like 0.01, 0.02, they'll be float. And when you do operations like plus, minus, etc., remember those arithmetic operators, and put those you feel is need to be priorities inside the parenthesis. Okay, when you do the calculation to do the formulation. Division always will give you a float output, and then you can choose to use modulos or integer divisions to depends on which type of output you are asking for. So yes.
Is there a reason that the integer would be better than the float? I mean, I guess just to save like space, like is there a reason you would choose one just to save space or?
For me, the basic one will be integers. If we're saying 100 versus 100.0, they takes different spaces in your memories. Okay. So usually one doesn't matter that much, but if it's saying a lot of a big matrix, then it costs a lot. And when you do the calculation, is even more, right? So, just the things, depends on which type of data you really want to try to work on. If
So-
you need precision, definitely going for a float.
So if you have, like, for example, you do some mathematical something and it gives you a float,
Mhm.
but to save space, you want it as an integer, can you convert it? Is there a way to?
It's a good question. We'll go through this a little bit later.
Okay.
But it like, if you are trying to, how to put that, you really don't want those digit information, you want to get results. You probably could just, like I just mentioned, you can use round to just print out not to the digit.
Okay.
Yeah, but you still need to cast that one into integers.
Okay.
So if you are giving Python like 100.01, and I wanna ask Python to say, hey, put this into integers. With the integer functions, they will not allow. You need to do some changing on that to sacrifice, make sure you know this is the information, you don't need it, and then go into the integer. Okay. Okay, so next sections, we're going to introduce variables and literals. Is concept-wise, variables will reserve a space in the computer memory to store data. So they can store a string, a number, a collection, for example, list. We'll go through this later, and any other types of data. So variable will have their specific name, own name, unique names, and to that will, whenever you call these names, they will represent these variables. Okay, and you can modify this or using those operators to do the calculation for these variables. Literals represent exact values that store inside the variable. And between the variable and literal, there will be a equal marks that will trying to assign this specific literal to this variable. Okay, so very simple in showing up here, and you will see left-hand side of this equation for this equal mark, which is a variable. I'm assigning this my variable, this one equals to a specific literal, which will be a strings. Okay, so they will be enclosed in the double quotation mark. This calls my first variable exponentiation mark. Okay, so every time I call my underscore variables, I'm calling this specific strings anytime until I reassigns or trying to modify these variables. Okay. So you can see here, I define these variables, and whenever I print this, they will show up the strings, the literals coming with the specific variables. Okay. For examples, when you do here, it's called assign my variables to a specific integer 7. Okay, so then I printed out my variables by calling the specific variables. Okay, then what would that show? There should be an integer 7 popping up. And I could do, because I know this one is an integer, it's a numbers, so I can do calculations or operations with the specific variables. We can do adding with this plus mark. Okay. So once you show, I call my variables, they will print it out as 7. When we do my variable plus my variables, they will telling you this is equals to 14. Okay. So that is the concept for variables and literals. So with just going through different data types and the concept for variables and literals, we're trying to assign specific variables that can store a strings, a numbers, a float, a collections, whatever, could be mixed as well. So if you know what data type it is, you can do manipulations with this specific function. So sometimes you want to check specific things, specific variables, what the specific data type are. We can call this type functions. which is a built-in function like Python already written for you. You just call this anytime and that will tell you what this specific variable, what the data type is. Okay, for example, if I put type and I put this float, we know this is a float inside, that will tell you this is a float data type. Okay, and this one is a hello world enclosed in the single quotation mark. So there should be a string. So using type, they will tell you this is a strings. So remember, we just assign my variable to a integer to be 7. So you can expect what the output are. They will tell you this is an integers. So there's going over some examples so we can be more familiar with numbers and the data types. So here I try to assign my underscore variable 1 to be integer 100, my variable 2 into integer 10. And I try to print out the summation for these two variables and then ask Python to tell me what the exact type of data will be the summation are. So you probably could know already in mind. So we are adding up two integers, but they could be an integers to be 110. Okay, so exactly they will tell you print out the summation for 110 will be 110 showing up. And this data type will be integer plus integer. There will be an integer. Okay, then let's see another examples. Okay, which would be my underscore variable 3, which is equals to a float 10.0. And then when you do the summations, what would be the data type showing up? And then if you're not sure, you can double check with the type functions. Okay. So that's telling you when you summate, trying to adding up an integer 100 with a float 10.0, the summation output will become a float. Okay. So also the type function will telling you this summation will give you a float equals to 110.0. Okay. Okay, so any questions so far? So I think I'll have a break here. So for 10 minutes. And when we are back, we are going through this exercise to more about numbers, and then we keep moving on. Okay. So we'll be back around 10. So where is the attendance sheet? Here. Okay, thank you. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. Kelsey. No problem. Did I mention? Second, yeah. Yeah, so please email Eloy, is our number, so we need, yeah, so it's the so he will probably send you the video after the conference. Or if you go to his laboratory, so there's already like videos for the water. It's also very similar. So if you want to just go through it, just to watch there. Or if you need this one, and just email. If you're ready.
I know you see credits, but I'm choosing the credits. Would it be too late to change your rate? Do you know the procedure?
I think it's like probably I think you need to take some workshop too. It's not just the one that reads, yeah. So, and then they were trying to, so, you know. I'm not sure for the students, yeah, so, you know. So just the minutes, shows the measures, assignments, biography, and then attendance sheet that you're ready for those 3 days. No, it's okay.
Oh, so kind of like being. Put down.
Say what? Apparently, so nice, but my first. It's nice to study muscle regeneration. Like. Like 5,000 cells, like maybe identify 11 that have the marker. It's like my eyes. Yeah, she looks like.
Okay, everyone, so we should continue our workshop. So, let's start with some, for this section, let's start with some exercise so we could be even more familiar with what we just learned. So here is a example code, like trying to say, we are trying to assign this X to be a variable and they will store a value, which is an integer 5, okay. And then the next line, we type X plus 5 and then print it out what the X would be. So anyone want to guess what should be? Exactly. So let's just type in this input box. So that will tell you, they will giving you the X because we didn't change anything about this stored variable X. So there will still remains to be 5. Okay. So every time you need to add on, they need to do reassign these variables using this existing variable. For example, if you really want to add in 5 to the already known X to be 5 plus 5, then you need to write in this way, X equal to X plus 5. So they will reassign the X to be equals to the original X plus 5. Okay. In this way, they will tell you X turn into the integer 10. Okay. So this is the variable assignment, and you need to reassign to change the stored values. Okay. So you can also written in this plus equal is for adding same thing like equals exact the same thing like this line X equals to X plus 5. Okay. It's equivalent. And it could also go into minus equal, multiplication equals, and division equals. Okay. So when you type X plus equal 5, so like here I use comment to tell myself which was equal to X equal to X plus 5. Okay. So this time X is already to be 10, and you adding up to be 5. They'll tell you it becomes 15 for this specific variable X. Okay. Questions? So there's 2 ways to do so, but always remember there will be the equal mark to assign or reassign the variable or the stored value. So Mello is asking, can you have multiple variables if you don't want to change X? Of course, like you can assign, for example, here you can assign another variable to be 5, y to be equals to X plus 5 is fine. So you can try typing here. If I wanna say, for example, X1 that will tell you. So there will be the x plus 5 again. If you don't want to change, then just reassign another variables, which is completely fine. So that's the numbers operations. So next, we're trying to do operations with strings. Like we just learned about strings in Python is always, you can think about it as text is also always enclosed with double quotation mark, a pair, or a simple quotation mark in pairs. Okay, so if you want to combine two strings together, you can use a very simple mathematical sign, which is the plus sign. So they will adding up this two string into one strings. This is the simplest way to do the string concatenation. Okay, for example, here's I try to multiply this hello with this comma space world. Putting this all together with this plus signs, they will print it out hello comma, and there will be even a space here, world exponentiation mark. So this is the simplest way to do string operations. Okay. But there's also other way to do so, to do the exact same things. So here trying to introduce another thing in Python is called method. Okay, so we just learned about a little bit about the function, which like we just use that to print out some strings. Okay, print out some variables, which is a functions that will taking up those parameters and trying to do the stuff the function should do repeatedly and then produce an output. Okay, method is very much similar, but they have different syntax, and they will usually be limited to specific type of data. Okay, so here we're trying to use this dot join parenthesis, this method. Okay, so here before this dot, there will be the original one. You're trying to join the rest of the strings inside. So join will be limited specifically to the string data types. So they will trying to tell you this function is trying to doing the string concatenation. Okay, so they will taking up a list as a argument and then join them together with the strings before the dot. Okay, so you can do this double quotation mark with nothing inside. So you can imagine this will be an empty strings. So we're trying to join this stuff inside this list into this empty strings. So which is doing the exact same thing like we just done here with just the regular plus signs. Okay, so let's see exactly what this for. So when we try to join anything inside the strings into an empty strings, they will result in this hello world things showing up. Okay, so what type of data this is, you can use this type functions to checking in. So they will tell you the output from this join method is exactly a string data type. So now we know two methods to do string concatenation. One is just putting an addition mark, or the summation operator. So they will put two strings together. Or you can use the join, trying to join any strings into one strings. Okay. So you can also format a strings by replacing into specific format. Okay, so this is a method called format. Okay, so you saw this dot method name parenthesis. You know this is we're calling a method to operate for specific type of data. So here we're trying to print it out. Bracket plus bracket equals to bracket. And we're trying to assign values for each bracket into 2, 2, 2 plus 2. Okay, so they will assign in orders. So this 2 will go to the first one. This 2, the second one will go to the second bracket. And the third one will go to the third bracket. So imagine what we're trying to print it out into a string. There will be 2 plus 2 equals to 4, but this will be a string form. Okay. And you can also do this with trying to format a float output. So here is an example. So we're trying to print discount, and then there will be this something inside this bracket. There will be a variable called val, and into 2 decimal float. Okay. So they will tell you this val to be number 2. So we can use this to see the next cells to see what the output would be. So let's print it out the first one. Using the format method, we are trying to assign the first bracket to be 2, the second to be 4, and the third one on the right-hand side of this equal mark to be the summation 2 and 4. So they will be printed out 2 plus 4 equal to 6. So this will be a string. This in total output is a string data type. Okay. So let's do the next one. We're trying to print it out a discount and the specific values with 2 floating formats. Okay. So they will tell you print it out in this form. We are trying to assign a discount into this value. And the format I want you to do is with just 1 digit in float format. So we're assigning this variable val to be integer 2, but I'm formatting that into a 1 digit float. So they will calling 1. Okay. You can also do this with 2 format. They will become 2 digits. Okay. So format, you can imagine they are trying to do the string manipulation, string formatting when you're generating the output. Okay. So now we know we can use join method to concatenate string together. We can use format method to print it out things into string into specific format. Okay. From concatenating, you can also just using the mathematical plus sign. Okay. And there are also different methods to dealing with the strings into the format you want it to be. Okay. So I'm here like look into this strip method, which is very commonly used when you do like deal with some text files and you want to remove those unnecessary empty space, prefix or suffix, those empty space. Okay. You can use this strip to remove specific things. Okay. And when you want to count the number of occurrences or the substrings, you can using this count method. Okay. So these are all method limited to this strings data type. Okay. So here we are getting this specific strings. So you can see there will be a tab or a lot of empty spaces before this ASDF blah, blah, blah. And there will be a lot of empty spaces at the end of the strings. Okay, so when you print it out first, that will tell you, you can see there will be empty space here's, empty spaces here's. Okay, and I don't want them. I want it to be only the character only. So I call this string method. So they will remove the empty stuff before and after this specific string. Yes.
When you use the strip method, does it count the number of spaces as characters or it just randomly removes all the spaces?
I think by by these definitions is like, so you see the strip, there will be a parenthesis after it. So there will be the default argument will be the empty space. So they will remove anything inside. Yeah. Okay, so now we got a clear strings without the empty space before and after this quotation mark. Okay, and now we want to know how many times does this AS showing up in this specific strings. We can call this function count and put in the argument to be a string named S. Okay, so when we call this, Python will count this for me. There will be 3 times of S showing up inside this specific strings. Any questions so far? Okay. So let's do some exercise with the settings. So I want you to create and print variables in this format. Okay. So there will be 2 variables, one called S1, one called S2. And then in this string terms, and trying to replace this X, Y, Z and X1, Y1. And then we can going for some exercises for this method we just learned. So here, the S1, I'm trying to replace the X, Y, Z into different strings, which will be the cats, dogs, and pigs. So I put this \T, remember, which will be a special character for tab. Okay, so you can see there will be a tab, a empty space, and then cats, empty space, blah, 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 to the end. And there will be a \n, which will be next line. Okay. So I assign this whole string into variable called S1. And then do the next one would be the S2. I put next line first, and then empty space, next line, uppercase cats and dogs, and the next line. Okay. And that's printed out what it looks like. So you can see there will be a tab right before at the beginning of the strings, and this empty space also count. Okay, so empty space showing up, empty space showing up, and then they will tell you, okay, in the final, go to the next line. So it's here. Okay, and then starting, we're printing S2 right after S1. So they will go to the next line here, showing up, and then print it out a empty space first, because there will be an empty space. I assign them. And then the uppercase cats and dogs, and then the next line showing up here. Okay. And now we see this is not the format we actually want. We want to get rid of those empty space. Okay, so we can call this strip method we just learned, trying to be printed out a clean version of S1 variable and a clean version of S2 variables. And then we assign this clean strings into another new variable called S3. Okay, and another new variable S4 to be a clean S2 strings. Okay, so let's see what they could show up. So now you can see those empty spaces, next lines are gone. Okay, they will print the 3 in a row, but those empty space in the middle, they will still be there. It's just that the prefix and suffix, they will be clear out. Okay. So this is the way we do text formatting. Okay. And now count the number of spaces in the variable S1 and the variable S2 using this count method. Okay. Remember, count method is trying to count specific occurrence for specific strings inside a strings you use as input. Okay. So let's do the S1 first. So S1, remember, there will be a lot of empty spaces before and after this visible strings. Okay. So that's printed out, they're telling me there's 4. So there will be 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Okay. So let's see the S3. So S3 will be exactly like this one, and how many empty spaces inside? That will tell you it becomes 2. Okay. So that will be, so here in the count, you are feeding in the argument you are trying to count. So the empty space, there will be a quotation mark, encircle, and empty space. So they are taking this as a string because count is limited. For the count method, here is like I'm trying to count the substring inside the strings. So we need to make sure the input is also in a string format, in a string type. Okay. So this is 2 methods we're trying to be familiar with. And then remember we just learned how to concatenate 2 strings by just using the mathematical plus sign. So we're trying to concatenate S1 and S2, then printing them out. So we can just put S1 plus S2. So this will be concatenated together and calling this printing functions to print out this specific strings. So they will telling you like this. So S1 and then S2. And concatenate S3 and S4. So they will print S3. There will be no empty spaces, okay? And then S4, they will be joined together. So, questions? Okay, good. So now let's do back to the numbers and then see what is the output from this code. Okay, so we have z equals to 5 assigned to the integer 5, z plus 11 printed out the z. What will be the output? Anyone knows?
5.
Sounds good. So we can just easily check right after in this interactive cells because we didn't reassign z. So they will always be the same one like you assigned them. Okay. And then next one, we assign x to be 41, z equals to x plus 11, x equal to 80. Printed out z, what would be z looks like? Yeah. So you might guess, right, this should be 52, okay. So the code is always read in order, okay, they will not change the orders. So we're telling Python x equals to 41, z equals to 41 plus 11. So that is the z assigned. No matter how we change x after, they will not change the previous code. Okay. So z will remain to be 52. And then let's do this one. Compute the volume and surface area of the sphere with a radius 6. So here is the equations. The volume will equals to 4 divided by 3 multiplied with pi and r with exponentiation 3. Okay. And then the area will be these formulations. So there will be just the calculations with the numbers. Okay. Let's do it for 1 minute. Okay, so here they tell us to do this with the radius equals to 6. So let's assign this first. Okay, so I'm assigning the radius equals to the integer 6. And we know also pi is indefinite, that's floating. So I'm just assigning pi to be 3.14 here. And trying to bringing in these formulations with 4 divided by 3. And I want to put this into priority. And then, so this should be enclosed inside this parenthesis, multiply with pi, multiply with exponentiation 3 with the radius. So R would be 6, we just assigned. Printed out V, and the area would be 4 multiply pi multiply R squared. Okay. So just trying to assign this radius and then assign the pi, and then bring in the formulation is also a kind of variable assignment. I'm assigning V to be the result from this equation. I'm assigning area A to be equals to this literal result. Okay. So when you print it out, it will telling us the volume could be 904 plus 3, and the area would be 452.16. So that's for the variable and the literal exercising. Okay. So we just remember we learned something like strings, we learned something about integer, we learned something about float. There are different data type, and sometimes they will be able to interchangeable for this. For example, you want to change an integer into a float. Logically is okay, right? So we might need to convert values between types, and we can and like to do more precise calculations or more easy for coding. Okay. So here I'm trying to adding up, printed out something like discount equal to this dollar mark and then +2. So from this line, I'm trying to concatenate two things together with this adding the summation mark, but they will raises an arrow, and let's see what is the arrow telling us. They will telling you this is a type arrow, so it's very obvious you are having trouble with your data type. Okay, so can only concatenate string to strings. We are trying to concatenate strings and integers, so they were telling you this is not doable. Okay, so now we need to cast these things, the digit 2, into strings, so we can print them out into one string. Okay, so we can do this very easily by just encircle this number 2 with quotation. So they will change this 2 into a strings. Okay, so this way we can print out the complete strings. Discount is $2. Okay, this will be a complete strings. There will be no arrow showing up. Okay, so that's trying to do this exercise. Create one variable of string type and one variable of float data type. Try to concatenate, and if not, you need to convert the float to string using this function, string parenthesis, and then trying to concatenate that again. So inside this interactive shell, we are trying to assign this S to be any kind of string data. So I'm telling you S is called string data, okay, with quotation marks. So this is definitely a string. And then create one float variable. So I'm assigning this F variables to be float 25.0. So there's two data types. Okay, I'm trying to print S concatenate with F into one strings. And they will definitely raises a type arrow because we're concatenating a string and a float, that's not going to work. Okay. So now we are trying to make this f variables into a strings by calling the string functions. And now they could tell you, we're able to do this concatenation because right now we are making the f, the 25.0 into a string format. And we can concatenate them together and print them out into one strings. Okay. So this is the casting we can try to do with the string and make an integer, making a float into this string format. We can also just encircle the numbers with the quotation mark, and then we'll change that anything inside to be a strings, and then we can do concatenation. Okay. Okay, so next. So any questions so far? So for this string manipulations, numbers, calculations, and also the casting, interchanging between data types. Good. Okay. So next we're trying to learn about the input and output. Okay. So input is a function. So you can see this is the syntax with input and calling a parenthesis after. So this is a built-in functions like already in Python programming languages. So anytime you call this, they will taking those things from your command line. Okay. So this function that reads data from user's input as a string. So they will read data from user's input, and also they will be transforming into a strings. Okay, so there's two important things. Okay, so we are trying to call input. So this pop-out window will show up. They are trying to ask you what you are trying to take in. So I'm telling them getting hello. So they will print it out, read this hello into. And remember, they will take this as a string. So also I'm typing in the string. So anyway, the output will show up as a string. Okay. So if we are taking in as 3, so the output, they are taking in, although I type in the numbers, but remember the input will be written as a strings. Okay, so you can see this 3 is in this string format. Okay. So you can also store what the user input into a specific variables. So you can take in user input as these variables and trying to assign with whatever the user gives. Okay, so I am assigning the user input to be this one. So this windows will also pop out. So I'm taking in anything. Okay, so I just type 2024. Okay, so there will be the user input into a strings. Now I'm trying to print them out. So that will telling me the user input has already become a string variables and then represent 2024 in a string format. Okay. You can also ask for questions. So you might definitely going through this a lot through some website. So for example, I'm asking, how are you, right? So here, when you put any strings inside this parenthesis, they will become the prefix for this specific window popping out. So they are saying, how are you today? I'm just answer anything. So they will be finished for this conversation once you hit the return or the enter. Okay. So this sounds familiar. That's when you have some password or the username box for some login website, right? Okay. So that is why they take the input and then tell the PC to checking correct or checking is wrong. Okay. So remember, input is the functions that will take anything the user give as a string. So what about I want to make the input into a format for numbers? So we were learning some casting skills, but we can casting a integer or float into strings, which means, or we can just encircle those float into quotation mark that will change them into strings. But now we are doing this the reverse way. We are trying to make a strings into a number. Okay. So here, user, I'm trying to assign this user underscore int, which should be the integers, a variable that will store whatever you give to your Mac or your Windows PC. Trying to input any integer. And I want to do calculations for this specific variables by multiply with number 2. Okay. So if I type 2, I want to do 2 multiply with 2. So you see there will be a different thing showing up. They will not be operated as a number. They will be operated as a strings. Okay. So this is not the things we are trying to see. Okay. So, and it's also showing up for this one. If we are trying to do with 4, they will give you a type error because we are trying to divide a string with an integer. Then how do we fix it? How to move the user input into an integer format? That's now we can use the casting or this specific functions. Okay, we can convert the numbers with this integer functions or this float functions. So anything they put inside this parenthesis, they will try to convert into integer if they could. For example, if you put number 4 as a strings, they will put them into integer 4. If you put 10.0 into this float functions, they will give you a float 10.0. So now, remember, we are trying to taking the user input as an integers, but they're always written as a strings. So we need to change them into integer by calling these functions. Okay. So now we are calling input any integers, and we are giving them number 4. So this number 4 will be reading in as a string format and then changing into integer format. Okay, and then store inside this variable. And then we are manipulating or calculating this variable with multiplication of 2. And then hit enters. Now it's become a normal multiplication. Okay. So writing, this is the input functions we just get, and we can also writing output with this specific functions we've gone through several times. It's calling print. So like its names can output variables of different types to display. So which means they will show up in your terminal and given as a separate parameters. Okay, so any functions, they will have parameters or arguments you put in. They will have essential or default one you need to input. For example, if you're printing specific things, you need to definitely give Python the things you're trying to print out, okay, which is number 2. And also you can print out several things, okay, with the separation, comma separation, okay. So let's see this. We just print integer 2. They will print it out as integers, and we are printing out different stuff. Okay, we are printing out integer, and then a string with this quotation mark, and then an integer again, and then a strings is equal mark, and then 4. They will print it out exactly like these things. Okay, and then we assign a to be 2 multiplied with 2. That should be equals to integer 4, right? So we are printing out a string called 2 times 2 equals what? Equals to 8. So this one will give you 2 times 2 equals to 4. So you might see this, like once you put a comma here, they will definitely separate it by an additional empty space or a blank show in between. Okay. So remember, we also learned in the last sections, we know how to calling a method called format is why we're trying to print it out. We're trying to make string into a specific format we're trying to print. So remember this one, we're trying to print out bracket plus bracket equals bracket, and we're assigning different things, different values inside this bracket by putting this 2, 2, and 2 plus 2 equals here. So they will give you the same thing like we just learned from print. Okay, so like here, we are getting the output the exact same thing, right? With this two way. One is the format and one is you just separate them, by giving print the specific parameters. Okay, but their output will be very similar and even the same. Okay. And then next one, so sometimes the variables could be, or the data type could be interchangeable. So we know how to change a integer into string, like for 2 in the integer form into a string form, and also casting back from a string into an integers. You can do this with float numbers as well. For example, we're assigning a to be a variable that will equals to 2.5, which is a float. Okay, so and the b, there will be a string form of a. Okay, by calling the string functions to be a, and then I'm printing out to see the data type changing. Okay, so we call a has type. Remember, we can always call the type functions to double check the data type for specific variables. So here I'm checking the variable for a. Here I'm checking the variable type for b. Okay, so we can check this. Here, we are typing in a and b, the exact same thing, and a should be in a float format, and b is the string form of a. So when you put it in, that will tell you A has the data type, which is a float. B has the data type as a strings. They were showing up as 2.5, very similar, but the data type is different. One can do mathematical operations, one cannot. And one can do string concatenation, but the float cannot. Okay. So let's finish this exercise here. Write a program that reads user's sentence and counts the number of words in the sentence and store this counted value as a variable. Print the number of words to the user. So there are 3 tasks. First is the reading input. The second one is counting for a substring inside a string. Okay. And then print it out. The numbers, printing out the count result. Okay, so the hint telling you we can use hint, we can use print. Okay. So here is my example code. I'm storing this variable into user input. So I'm asking the user to input a sentence, and I'm trying to remove unnecessary empty space before and after the sentence. And I'm trying to count space inside, and then I'm printing out a space count. And we can even adding up the space number count. Because it's already an integer, we can do mathematical counting with this. So let's run this. So now this window pop out, so we can input any sentence here. Okay. So Python will store how are you into the user input as a string. And then we are counting the empty space inside, which should be 1 and 2. There will be 2 empty space. So this space underscore count will be a variable. This variable will be number 2, okay? And there should be number of words. So you can see number of words should be the space plus 1, right? So there will be 3 words. So we are just adding space count with 1 and then print out the number of words into 3s. So that is the output we got. Next, write a program like reads a radius of a sphere from the user and then compute the volume and surface. Like we just did this like 10 minutes ago. Print out the volumes and surface. So what makes it different is we are also assigning variables, but this time we're taking the input from the user. Okay. So this will always go to the input functions, but you have to be careful because input function will taking in anything as a strings, but we need to do the calculation. We need to casting them into a numerical form. Okay, so that's the 3 things you need to be careful. So first of all, I'm trying to assign pi into this float numbers, and then R will be the radius. So we are trying to take the input from the user. So we're taking the input, asking them to input the radius, and taking this stuff, a string, into a float format. So it's easier for us to do the volume and area calculation. Okay, so next we can just formulate it by assigning this volume variables to this specific formulation. Okay, and then print this in a specific format. And then area would be the surface area and with this specific format. Okay. And if you run this, and I put the radius to be 5, they will tell me the volume would be the 523, area would be 314. And here I'm trying to print it out the volume in the format with 4 digits. Okay. So they will telling, I'm calling this format method, okay, to only print it out 4 digits. Okay, so they will show up as 4 digits. Okay. So final exercise, no, not final. For this section, we are taking this exercise and we are having a break now. So this exercise is trying to ask you to generate a Celsius to Fahrenheit converter. So there will be the temperature stuff. We want to know, for example, this 32 degrees, what is that? There will be different unit, right? So we all know the Fahrenheit to Celsius, the formulation should be shown up here. So Fahrenheit will be like 9 divided by 5, multiply with Celsius degrees and plus 32. Okay. So I'm assigning the Celsius to be the user input the Celsius degrees and converting them into a float and trying to fit in to the float to the Fahrenheit calculator here. So they will finally change every Celsius degrees from the user into the Fahrenheit. Okay. So now we can know they're asking for 32. So I'm adding in 32 Celsius. So this program will tell me, this equals to Fahrenheit 89.6. Okay. So this will be for these sections, we know different casting or different formatting or input and output for taking in these variables. So we are having a 10 minutes break. So we'll be back around 11 and we'll finish in the next perhaps 20 minutes and we're good to go for today. Okay. So I'll see you at 11. So let me know if you have any questions.
I have tried to do that both grades, but it doesn't work.
That's like.
So this person is Jason. This is for baby.
It shows how many decimals you can. Like, what is the dot? Yeah.
Oh, okay, so you have to.
It's not like this. Like,
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, no, I didn't think about that.
This one is like. But if someone asks me, they also make these rated, but it's like.
Okay, that's
It's not like it's.
Yeah, that's just eight, yeah, but. Oh, are you on this? I just came from TA. Oh, sorry. Basically, you never managed to get on the business line. Yeah. Like, I didn't. Oh, you have to.
Yeah,
Okay, but I know like the students are like, okay.
Oh, God, I'm sure.
That was the only thing I didn't. Yeah, I think they would be like.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, or like I should trust something. For marine states.
I just have a question. Can you explain what kind of means? And just like, I understand that that's like, probably like.
But yeah, I do for.
Let's say like, I was really kind of good, like, okay, I really want to print.
Was this your
answer
year?
as like.
This is, so we'll start my second year.
Yeah, what, I've got like.
You still left. So here it's a first year.
Oh, yeah? Yeah. Cool.
Is a variable like.
Yeah, so you have TA first quarter or first?
So no, I have TA 3. But here I'm trying to bring this into specific format.
Okay.
So this format means have one this into 4 digits, the job. So this will be the Python syntax to have. I don't want to. Because other two values. So this one could be changed like. You can put them into like lowercase. I'm like it's fine to them.
So this is another variable, but it only belongs to this line.
Okay, so if I call
Lowercase b.
yeah,
And then you need to change this.
so that would. Then I was going to say that the line close, the new one first. Sorry.
Form.
So you need to specify that the new variable.
Yeah, equals to,
Is there any
Yeah.
difference in like typing space between them?
So.
both fine.
Yeah. You put it wrong stuff. The
Oh, right, sorry.
undergrad, I.
So this line is telling, so anything.
Professor,
inside
the
this
she was
function
interested in
belongs to
like
this
section
function. So you can assign variables here. They will belong to this, not going out. But
So we
this
ended
big
up
V is across the whole file, and it's not changing until you assign them.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What if like they just put the big V there and like didn't have this part of the format? So does that make sense? Or if we just put big V and then the whole line and then point forward to indicate the spacing? It like then would this still be necessary like to indicate? I mean, so would we do that line or can we just put that line to like see the shape? Or you have to put right and it would so. Do you remember the
I think this one would be like, they will print exactly what you know.
Oh,
You
and
can
you
even
have to
do
do
it
it
on that.
So apparently, so you have to, so then like, you have the initial variable and then you have to put the value like.
Yeah, they're assigning, right? Yeah, they are.
And we got it shipped in the.
Inside this.
Like not in the-
That's right.
That's because this became a string as soon as you put the
Yeah.
quotation marks, but what if we took off the quotation marks? Would you still need to?
No, because this format, methods, they only took the string.
That's.
That's different.
This format.
Yeah.
Oh.
So this is a building
The entire
method.
time. It was like, it wasn't that, it was
thought, there will.
other animals. It was.
A street research, you are feeding.
Yeah.
Things
So
inside.
we have like sweet.
Okay, so this is like, you can think about this like, it's very specific to this. This, they are doing only one
Gross is
thing,
what it
is
is.
trying to make, the style you are showing out. So they will assign you the things you're trying to show off into this format, and then we break them from your And this also includes the whole thing inside this function.
Okay.
But it's like the notation, like we would have to put like print and then format B so it knows that.
Okay, so it's just to make sure I understand, this way the print function will take kind of whatever's in there.
Yeah.
We, the format function only strings, and we want to format the volume as like a 4-digit decimal, right? And then, but we want the, to print out what the answer to that would have been, so that's why you need the V, is what we're redefining the V to.
I think this is a bit like confusing, but this is like a good exercise, because you know, you can always change like the name for variance. You can always change, you can change this V as well, you can change this V as well. It only matters when you know what you are looking to. Okay, and the universe one is like this, going like crazy, like I can
Yeah.
spread it. And anything for.
I mean, it's honestly my favorite part of it.
This
It's
belongs to
but
this.
it's just in general, like that's.
If you can use like easier way to.
I don't have equipment for this, great.
You mean like,
It's like, could I,
Trash bag
is
and
there
everything
like
else,
kind of a, like, maybe like a dot format or like some similar thing?
yeah.
To where I could just like specify in my variable that I want that to.
It just kind of happened because.
Or would I have to reformat it?
You can call a function called round,
Like, yeah, my
Oh, okay.
master's,
Okay.
and round to.
he actually reached out.
Arguments. I had the first one is here, for example, investors.
And how many?
I don't think.
Okay.
The official sentence, and
Okay.
I guess. This one is, and I worked on fish, so.
Is there like, I guess, sorry, I'm in like biology, I'm trying to think of like, you know, like, calculating like numbers of means. Is there a benefit to having a load, like a string versus a load?
Any bound that kind of.
Yeah, like, I guess like what's the difference in like the types of.
Project
you know.
Yeah, I can promise to work on like to do so things about like every single cell like on the color, but it was 10,000 like on basically we more and came out for 10,000 also we wanted.
So that's more like if you're worried about the base and like of your code, it's like you don't want like a massive code file. So that's why you would prefer, and you could just like switch between like, you know, you run your code as an integer, but then when you add in a line to change it to the string, it's like,
It is one aspect.
Okay.
Yeah, but most of the time that if you are getting number, which you need to do something. And you don't want to have already has them all fit into strings and you need to cast it down. Yeah, and it's always better to think of whatever. No, this if I'm going to do.
Why is it always in here? You have to learn the money to go to students.
And that's the thing. I'll just like. And integers. Other person needs, and he loves have sometimes 4 digits. It could be something like. Last year it's a space, so it depends on the ones that you didn't do. Wait, so you're saying you guys think children, but they are showing you data. No, we don't.
thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, like does it ever happen?
What? It's kind of like, you know, going through like order of operations, like it's kind of,
Yeah, so I actually going.
it's like, I can do this now. Yeah, okay, this is gonna spit up the answer.
And then this was like, so you don't get it.
Yeah, and also like prevents you from forgetting, because otherwise there's like memorization. You just like make an extra.
Yeah.
Or you didn't remember your number, but now you know every other website. Like children rights. Okay, everyone, let's continue our final section. So so far we've know 2 very common data types. I mean, the categories like string and numbers. And numbers, there's into integer, float. Sometimes they could be interchangeable, sometimes they cannot. Depends on how you like to manipulate with this data type. When you're trying to print, you need to know you cannot concatenate 2 data type together. You need to concatenate string with string. You need to do mathematical operations. You need to deal with float or integers. Okay. And we know some functions to dealing with the input and output. By input is meaning you taking anything by the user's keypad. Anything they type, they'll take it into a string format. So if you are taking into a integer, you need to do casting or the calling the int or the float function to make the input into numbers and not strings, and then do the following calculations. So, so far we've learned a lot from this. We know format to deal with the string output. We know count to count for substring inside a full strings. We know strip to exclude those unnecessary empty spaces before and after specific terms. Okay, now we are trying to go through a 3rd data type, which is the booleans, and it will go highly related to those logical expressions or when you're making decisions. So booleans, there are separate data type, which is yes or no. That's called boolean. Okay, so there's 2 possible values. One is called true, one is false. So when you're trying to see, when you type true, which will be a specific things, which is the variable, it's a Boolean variable. So the data type here will calling you, this is a Boolean category of data. Okay, so it's a logical expressions helping you, asking Python to make justification or the decision for you. Okay, so the straightforward thing is you can think about this in this greater than, small, less than, equal to, or not equal to. I'm trying to make sure if I'm making the right decision. Okay.
For example, here, like I'm typing X less than Y. So if they will only return two results, true or false. Okay. So there's other operators like less or equal to. Okay, there will be also greater or equal to. When you put double equals here, which means is X equals to Y, which is the logical term. Okay. And then if you put exponentiation equal, which means not equal to. So this term means X not equal to Y. So it's just mathematical operators, but it's working in logical expression. Okay. So imagine 10 less than 15. It is a correct terms. So they should return you a true. Okay. So this one will give you a true. So 12, if I'm saying 12 greater than 12, okay, that will give you a false because they're equals to. Okay. If you put greater or equal to, they will give you a true. Okay. And they can also be working with the alphabetic order. Okay, so here you can see is this AB strings greater than BB. Okay, so that will give you probably a false because A is before B, right? So this should be the reverse way. BB should be greater than AB. Okay, so this logical term could also be applied to alphabetical order, not just numbers. Okay. So there are several rules applies you will be familiar with once you start the coding and codings. So just have the concept and you don't have to memorize all of them. But just keep working on it, keep exercising it. In someday it will be embedded in your mind. Like it's how do we make this justification? Okay. So exercise for now: create and initialize two variables of numerical type X and Y. Okay. Create a variable B that's equals to X, some operator Y, where this operator could be greater, less than, equal to, not equal to, etc. Print variable B and print type of the variable B. Okay. So this is trying to do some logical expression with numbers. So now I'm trying to assign X equals to a float 3.2. Y, which is a float as well, which is the 4.0. I'm creating the variable B here. That means X operating Y. So I'm trying to store a B variable that is telling me X equals to Y. So that is asking Python to make the decision, is that true or false? Okay, so you can imagine B would be a data type Boolean. Okay. So print out data type of B. Okay. So now I'm assigning X to 3.2, Y equals to 4. If I'm asking Python A equals to Y, which is a false. So they were telling me B is a variable that is a false. Okay. Which data type is it? Which is a Boolean data type. There's only true or false happening. Okay. So now what is the output of the following code? Okay. So I'm assigning X to be 12, B equals to the things X is equals to 5, this term, and then print B. What would B represent? It should be a false. So we can just definitely check here that will telling you this is a false statement that we store inside this B variable because X definitely is equals to 12. So X is equal to 5. This is a false statement. And we store this false inside the B variables that will telling me this is the false output. Okay. So these Boolean variables, although you just have like two output, in your coding, and later on is very useful when you ask Python, when you ask your program to make decisions several times. Okay. For example, we're trying to go through this if statement. So if statement can alternate the program flow using Booleans. So here is an example for this if statement. So in Python, you can code with if when some criteria meet, they will execute the next line. Okay. So what if something else happens? So they will go to the else if, the second other occasions might happen. So this one is optional. Only the if is essential for here. Okay, so the default setting is anything is correct will go through, execute this one. Okay. And anything not fit this criteria, they will go to the others. Okay. So you can set up different criteria. So you can have duplicate else if, but only one if and one else if, one else. Okay. So here's also an example for doing programming with Python is the indentation stuff. So for example, this one, I'm asking if something happens for the next line, the next layer of the code, we need to have this indentation. Okay, so it's different layers of the code. So if something happened, then we do this. If this happens, we do this. If none of this above, we do this one. So we check first and do the next. So this will be separated with this indentation. Okay. So I think it's more easier to go with examples. So let's do if statement with some examples showing below. So we're trying to have two teams. One is eagles, one is tigers. There were different scores. I'm assigning eagle score to be 90, tiger score to be 97. So there are two integers, right? So I'm trying to ask Python to say, if eagle is greater than tigers, then we'll print eagles win. Okay, so it's very simple logic, just making decisions for me, like if this is a true statement. Okay, so we put into the input box, and then they will give you, if eagles is greater, they will print this. If not, then nothing happens. So like I just showed, this is a false statement. They will not going through these lines. So nothing is going to happen. Okay. So next we're putting in more conditions, which is adding on the else terms. So it's the same, we're assigning eagles with score 90, tigers with score 97. If it goes greater than tigers, we print eagles win. Else, which means other occasions, they'll print tigers win. Okay, so let's print this first. The exact same thing. So if we do this, Python will tell me, sorry, 97. They will definitely tell me tigers win in this game. So you can see we're just comparing two numbers, but sometimes there will be equals to happens, which means we're not considering all of the occasions, all of the possibilities, because they could be ties, they could be the same numbers. So when you do programming, you need to consider all of the possibilities and make them into this statement to be as complete as possible. Okay. So like I said, if I'm printing 90 and versus 90, they're exactly the same thing, but they'll give me these things, because we didn't consider the ties occasions, they will give me the tigers win. This is definitely a wrong statement, right? So we're canceling this with additional if else statement. So we are putting in else if to see if eagles is less than, and then we print tigers win. Otherwise, we'll print their ties. So there's 3 occasions, 3 possibilities, either eagles win, either tigers win, or they ties. Okay. So if they're 90-90, they're definitely a tie games. Okay. So now we are expanding this exercise into with what we just learned from the last sections. Write a program like accept the user's input for eagle score, and also accept the user's input for tiger score, print the winning team. So the third terms here would be exactly like we just do with the if statement here, right? But the thing is, like, we need to ask the users to input the score. So remember, we learned the input functions just now, and the input function will take whatever the user type, and that will read it into a string format. But now we need to do justification based on the greatness of the numbers. So we need to make them into an integers. So now we store the variable eagles total score with user input asking for eagle score. And we are casting this into an integer format. Again, we are creating the tiger's total score variables, asking the users to give input of the tiger score and changing them into the integer format. And then we just copy and paste what we just do with the if statement to making decisions which team will win or is the tie games. Okay. Everything is the same, just taking the user's input. Okay. So now I'm giving the eagles to be 90, the same thing. We're giving the tigers to be 90. So they will give us a tie games again. Okay. You can also use this to do the unit test. Okay. So I think this will be the same thing as we just do with the ties games. You just repeat the same thing, like you have to consider all of the possibilities when you make those if statement. If the thing only the if statement is necessary, those else or else if, these are optional, but as complete as possible to make sure you consider all of the things could happen. Okay. So now, since we're going through the if statement, we're starting to code more than just one statement, one line. Now we know the indentations do matters in Python because that's how they separate the coding block. Okay, so there will be some terms, keyword, I would say, that is trying to hold a space for you when you just want to does nothing but consider this occasion. So this is an example. So we are assigning A to B, number 3. B is also number 3. So we are compare the A and B. If A is greater than B, then we print A is greater. Else if A equals to B, I don't want to print anything. I just let it pass. So I'll give this keyword pass. But we do consider this occasion is happening. Okay. Else I'll print B is greater. Okay. So this will give you the exact when we give A and B, they'll go through the whole if statement. So this will be the right one that is happening. So they will do nothing but go through the whole if statement process. Okay. So pass will be the keyword when you're using this if statement, or tomorrow we'll learn about the loop. Pass is also using there as well. Okay. So now what does the program print? So let's give A variable to be number 17. I'm saying is if A greater than 12, then I'll change A equal to 1. If A less or greater than 12, A is equals to 3. Else A equals to 2, then I'll print it out what A is. So there are things you need to be careful. There's 2 if statement occurring. And this the second if else statement, they will have 2 occasions, 2 possibilities happening. Okay. So let's go through this. You can have your answers in mind, but let's check if you are guessing it right. Okay. So I'm giving this the same thing, A equals to 17. So I'm going through the first if statement. If A is greater than 12, it's definitely a false, right? It's a true statement, A is greater than 12. Then I'll change A into 1. Okay, then I test if A is less or equals to 12, which is also a true. Then we change A into 3. Okay, so that would be the final step. We're not going to the next else. Okay, so this will telling me A will be number 3. There's 2 if statement, and always read the code in order. A going through the first if statement, make sure it's true, then changing to 1. And then with A equals to 1, then we go to the next if statement. And this one, the first one is true statement. So A will be equals to 3. So that is the Boolean operators greater than, if A is greater than B, if B is equals to 3, for example, like this. So Boolean operators have like this tables. You might not memorize right now, but it's there are some rules apply. Okay. So when A and B are both false, A or B will be false, A and B will be false like this. So there's different combinations. If A is false, B is true, then we say A or B, there will be a true. A and B will be a false. So that's a bit complicated, but you will be more and more familiar when you're going coding more and more, of course. And you can also say A equals to false. Not A will definitely mean true. It's the logic things, right? Okay, so there's some rule as well, like and is always with higher priority than or. Not has higher priorities than and. Anything inside parentheses will changing the priority, that will do it first, okay, in the flow. Okay. So here is just trying to go through everyone. So true and false, that will give you a false. True or false, that will give you a true. Okay, just to go, if you don't memorize, just go through this tables. So remember, and is always have higher priority than or. So they will say true and false first. So there will be false, true or false. That will be true. Okay. So it's just like this. This should be the same output for this 2 line because and is always have the higher priority. But if we are changing the flow by making this first true or true, true or true, that will be a true. And true and false, that will be a false. Okay, not true, definitely false. Okay, so making this into a operator term. Okay, 5 is greater than 4, which is a true statement. 5 is less or equal to 4 is a false statement. Okay, true and false, that will give you a false. Okay, so here again is like true or false, that will be a true. Okay, just if you don't memorize, just go over it and doing more and more, and you will familiar with this. Okay, so not true and false. So remember this priority terms, not has higher priority than and, then or. Okay, so here not true, false, false and false, that will be a false. Again, not true, since this will be already a priority, there should be the same thing in the previous one, okay? But if we're circling this true and false, that will be a false, not false, should be true. Okay, just the Boolean operators, and several occasions could happen. So write a program that checks if the numbers from the user's input is divisible by 3, 5, 7, but not 15, 21, 35, 105. So you see we got several possibilities happens. And we're trying to make into a if statement, okay? So again, we're taking the input asking the users to give you a numbers, okay? So once you take the numbers, we're checking if they are divisible. Divisible means their remainder from the division will be 0. So remember this modulo operators, they will give you the remainder, okay? So I'm asking if the number is divisible by 3 or divisible by 4, etc., and not by 15. So it's not equal to 0 by this remainder, not equals to, not equals to, okay? So it's very straightforward, and you just, if this is okay happening, they will print divisible. Otherwise, there will be nothing going out, okay? So any numbers you can put into. So just checking that we're taking you, this is the divisible numbers. So let's do this exercise and then we can conclude for today's workshop. Write a program like check if the years from the user's input is a leap years. So there's a definition for leap year, of course. So first of all, that should be divided by 4, fully divisible by 4. It's a leap year. Okay, but there will be outliers or exceptions. For example, century years, 300, 700, etc., need to be divided by 400. So that could be a leap year. So while century years per year not divisible by 400 is not a century years divisible by 400. Okay, so there's 2 rules, basically 2. One is whether it's century years. If so, you need to divide it by 400. If not century years, it need to be divisible by 4. So you can think of this. So asking the users to give you a year and casting them into an integer, okay? And then checking for if this is a century years. So if this, so century years means it could be divisible by 100, right? So if it's a divisible by 100, which means the modulos will be 0. No, let's go to the force first, whether it's force. And the second one is, so this altogether will give you a 400 division. So this will give you a leap year. Okay. So if not divisible by 800, there's still, sorry, I'm getting this wrong. There's another layer, which will be if here is divisible then it is a leap year. . if it's not divided by 4, it should definitely not a leap year. So there will be the different layers of considerations and different criteria. You just need to first of them trying to figure out across this several hints showing up, what will be the priorities and what should be considered first, and making them into the code, Okay. So I think there will be for today's workshop. So remember we know different data type for string, numbers, integer, float. We also learned about Boolean, which would be the true or false, which will help you to run into those if statement to ask Python to do the justification or decision for you. Okay, so there's different rules applies to those Boolean operations, like true and true, true and false, etc. And there will be priorities for this operations as well. You don't have to memorize all of them now, but just have the concept. And once you go through coding more and more, you'll definitely be familiar with them more and more. So for students, you are taking this workshop for credit. So there will be 3 assignments for today. So which will be, you can use what you learned from today's workshop to finish this within a few minutes. So so if you don't have time today, it's fine. I just need to get your assignment by the end of Saturday this week, and then you're good to go. So yes.
How do we turn the assignment to you? Do we send you
Okay.
a file? Do we send you a screenshot?
You can do screenshot, or you can type in here into this interactive shelf and save this IPython notebook and email me. So, or you can write in any text added as well. If you just need to show me what is output and what is your code. Anyway. Okay, any questions? If no, we'll hope to see you tomorrow. And I think we have 10 more spaces in the classroom. So anyone over Zoom want to join in persons, just let me or Eloy know. Yep. So I'll see you tomorrow.
Sorry, can you scroll up to the last one we did for a little bit? Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess I have a general question.
Yeah.
So like
Let
in,
me-
so I've used our studio a little bit, and
Mhm.
in there, like the